what's up everyone? It's your girl Brain Shanae, and today I'm going to be doing a book review. I'm going to be doing a book review for one of my anticipated reads of 2024, and I cannot wait to share with you this incredible, well-written piece of work and art. And I'll be doing a book review for Where Sleeping Girls Lie. This is by Farida Abike-Yamide, and I'm just excited to get into this with you. Now, my format for this video, I'm thinking of just doing a little review of the book without spoilers. And then during like the next half of the video, I'll be doing some spoilery stuff. So I will let you know beforehand when I do some spoilers. So let's get to with this book review. Now, for this particular book, I want you to know, like right off the bat, there is content warnings within this book. So I just want you to be all aware. So there is, and it deals with many like realistic issues, okay? Realistic issues. So there's sexual assault, rape, suicide, suicidal ideation, grief, and the death of a family member. So just keep that in mind before you read this, that there are content warnings. Now, for this book review, I also want to read the author's note. This is at the very beginning of the book, and it goes on to say, "Dear reader, Where Sleeping Girls Lie is about a lot of things. It's about the necessity of community and the importance and joy of platonic relationships. It's about the ghosts that haunt us and that we haunt back. It's about the many valid ways we respond to painful experiences. More than anything, this book is about survival, and as you might notice from the sizable gap between the release of Ace of Spades and the release of the second book, it took me many years to write this in a way that felt like I would be honoring the story, the characters, and any readers who might see themselves in this story. Also, second books are just bloody hard." When asked about whether I write myself into my stories, I always answer that I don't, because I'm more of an observer than a memoirist. However, Where Sleeping Girls Lie is definitely one of my most personal stories to date. While I have not inserted myself exactly into any of these characters, some experiences and feelings depicted are things I unfortunately relate to deeply. I want this book to showcase a main character who lives a full life despite any past traumas, much like I try to, and so in the spirit of this, WSGL is not just one kind of story. It is part suspense, mystery, part contemporary romance coming of age, part anti-hero journey. When I write stories, I'm always writing to specific feelings at the time, as well as people and places. With Ace of Spades, I was primarily writing to queer Black young adults attending PWIs and being pulled under by the weight of white supremacy, drowning while feeling unseen and unheard. With Where Sleeping Girls Lie, I write to young girls who feel so much anger and need desperately for someone or something to tell them their rage is important and that the capacity to heal from deep wounds is not at all impossible. While writing this book, I kept thinking of Alatwantian Salou and women like her who deserve so much more than this world gives them. Where Sleeping Girls Lie is my attempt at not only healing some of my own wounds, but also helping others seek out the tools to do so as well. I want this book to be so many things, but of course, what I want is not as important as what this book might mean to you. And so I ask you to take care, as always, while reading, and I hope you enjoy the characters and the story as much as I enjoyed writing them. With love, Farida. So just with that, like, note from the author alone was very powerful, and it spoke volumes into a lot of things that are happening today in society. Now, with this story, with Where Sleeping Girls Lie, we're introduced to the main character, Sadeh Hussein, and right off the jump, we're introduced to her, about her mother and about her father, and it was just really hard hitting, and just with that alone, I think it gives you a little snippet of Sade's, the main character's life, and what she has been going through and what she still goes through. And it also introduces us that she deals with anxiety and depression as well. So as you read on through this book, we get snippets of Sade and her life and what she has gone through, what she's still going through when it comes to grief. This gives you a good example of people's journey when it comes to grief and how they deal with it. Sometimes it may be a couple weeks and then something triggers it. It may be, everyone has their own journey or own thing when it comes to grief, because everybody experiences it in different ways. And that's one thing that I will say about this book. It does that well when it comes to grief and how there's different stages and stuff as well. And people will how they cope with certain things. They have their own different coping mechanisms. So, you know, you have to keep that in mind as you read this. So with Sade, she is going to school. She used to be homeschooled, but now she's going to school, and she's going to this academy. It's called Alfred Nobel Academy, ANA, is what they usually call it throughout the book, ANA. And with this academy, it's mostly well known for its swimming team. And in this book, we also deal with houses. I believe 8 houses are within this school, where the houses are divided between, you know, people that are mostly like very smart academically, or you are just great with sports, and then there's some that are a jack of all trades. And so with these 8 houses, you deal with Curie, Hawking, Turing, Seacole, Einstein, Mendel, Jemison, and Franklin. And these are all houses named after scientists. So once again, all these houses are divided up between, you know, if you're great academically or with sports or whatever, or a jack of all trades. And so with Sade, she goes to the Turing house, and she ends up meeting not only the person who gives her the tour of the school, but also is her roommate, which her name is Elizabeth. And she goes to the school. She tells them that this group is this group. You have the unholy trinity. You have this group. You have pretty much the jocks, or whatever you like to say, for sports, and people that are great academically. And as she's touring the school, I think Sade is getting a whole mindset of where she is and and her surroundings. And then literally after a few hours later, her roommate ends up missing. And that's when things starting to take place. And Sade is trying to figure out, okay, maybe she left, maybe she did this. Next thing you know, they get an email from her so-called family member saying that she's staying with her great aunt. But as this email was, you know, said to the school, that Elizabeth is well and alive and is just not attending school at the moment. She's with family. Sade ends up talking to her roommates, you know, Elizabeth's best friends, Basil, or they call him Baz. And he pretty much was telling her, like, this can't be right because her, you know, her aunt is dead. Like, she died 2 years ago. So that's when things start taking place. And that's when we're starting to get to know more about Sade and her as a person. And we start adding up things. Okay, what's going on? Who was she with? Who was she talking to? Who was her nemesis? Who did not like Elizabeth? It just breaks that everything down in this book, which I really, really love. But also, as her roommate is missing, all eyes are sort of turned to Sade, and Sade is really like wondering, like, I know it wasn't me, I didn't do anything with my roommate, you know, but since she is the roommate of her missing roommate, she looks like a suspect. So she's worried about being also expelled, and that's the last thing she wants to do, because going back home would just be torture to her, because she would really go back to what she considered the house of horrors, and the halls were haunted with ghosts, right? So she really doesn't want to go back home. Like, she just can't. She cannot do it. And so she's pretty much trying to find out what happened to her roommate on her own with Baz. And they start doing their research. They start asking people certain questions on whether, you know, did they have something against Elizabeth, or did she really just go into hiding? Like, what was going on? And that's when a lot of things take place in this book, which I feel is going to be very, very spoilery. But literally, before I get to the spoilers, I will say, like, this book, it takes you on a journey of trying to find Elizabeth, of Sade's roommate, but it takes us on a journey of getting to know Sade, and starting from the beginning of her mother and father. So I just wanted to let y'all know that, just a small snippet of this book. And I'm gonna let y'all know I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because it is very realistic to today's society. And like, this book is located in England, but I feel like this is a type of story that it happens anywhere and everywhere. And I liked how this book tackles a lot of issues that happen in today's society, especially within schools and establishments, and, you know, like uni and universities here in the US and college and stuff like that. So I like that it brings awareness, just like Ace of Spades brought awareness to a lot of things that happen in high schools and stuff like that. And in general, I like that for Frida's work and her books, she's bringing awareness to a lot of topics, a lot of realistic situations that people, like certain establishments and academic settings, where they try to ignore it because of certain people that are accused of certain things. They look like, oh, well, we don't want to accuse them or whatever, but they don't want to accuse that specific person because they are privileged or they have a family with a lot of money. And so a lot of things are pushed aside. But yeah, so now I'm going to go into a more spoilery, in-depth review of this book. I didn't want to get too much of the spoilers in the first couple of minutes of this video, but now I want to get into the spoilery, get to the nitty-gritty of things, and break everything down with this book. So if you don't want to know anything spoilery about this book that I'm about to pretty much tell you, definitely leave this video now. But if you don't mind the spoilers, definitely stay here because it's gonna get crazy. Okay, so everyone who's here for the spoileries, like, just be prepared and be ready. So literally at the beginning of the book, like I said, we're introduced to Sade and her experiences, but I never got into the depth of what happened to her. So literally when Sade was very young, her mother passed away and her mother committed suicide. Sade found her mother in a tub of water. And then also she witnessed her dad passing away as well. And we have no idea what or why or what happened to him, you know, the cause of his death. And so she is still going through this grieving for her family members. And her father seemed to have a lot of money as well. And so she attends a school, ANA, Alfred Nobel Academy. She meets with Elizabeth, who is not only a person that's guiding her through the school and introducing her to certain groups in the school, she's also her roommate, which ends up going missing. And, you know, since she is the roommate of Elizabeth, she is the suspect, but she is not. And so she is now trying to investigate Elizabeth's murder. And so literally as Baz and her are out and about outside of the school trying to figure out the last place where Elizabeth would go or where she usually would go, they end up going back to the school, and Sade ends up going into her room and everything is disheveled, like someone had been in there. And then she sees this box. It's like a music box and it has the initials of TG on there. And so she's like, who is TG? And so then there's this. So now they're trying to investigate who has these initials. Who is this person that literally went into this room trying to look for stuff and had it disheveled and everything, right? So they end up doing some things where, you know, they're not supposed to, of course, but they wanted to get down to the nitty gritty because you have the headmaster, Weber, of the school, who is just ignoring them. You know, Sade's pretty much telling them like something's not right. That was a fake email, but they just push it aside. They just ignore the students. They ignore their claims on certain things and just move on like nothing happened. So Sade also has her own agenda. So eventually she finds out that there was a Morse code on the music box, and apparently she gets to find out that the Morse code is what the Hawking house usually uses. That's the Hawking tradition that the specific house uses. So she broke it down into this one house, the Hawking house. And then she learns more about Elizabeth, and that Elizabeth was trying to expose a certain group of people, and they were called the fishermen, which is a type of group or chat that the boys from the school usually are on. And that's when they talk in Morse code. They expose a lot of girls, videos and pics, all that on this group chat. And now she's pretty much, Sade is trying to figure out who is who. But then as all this is happening, as all this investigation is going on between Sade and Baz, trying to get down to the disappearance of Elizabeth, you have this boy named Jude Ripley, who is like the best swimmer in this school, right? And you know, he comes from money. So he's rich, his family's rich and loaded. So he is pretty much known as the player of this school. And all of a sudden he's trying to get to know Sade because she is new, right? So he's pretty much trying to get to know her, pretty much saying, you know, I'm not like what these girls tell me, yada, yada, yada. But Sade ain't falling for it. And so he takes her on these crazy, like, small dates, like they got coffee and stuff like that. And she's ended up turning him down. And he did not like that at all. Not one bit. But once again, he's known as a player. And then you have, I mentioned the Unholy Trinity, which is a popular group, and not Elizabeth, but Sade is getting to know Persephone. And Persephone was even warning Sade of Jude, and that she should stay away from him. He has done a lot of things to girls at this school, and she should just stay far away from him. And Sade didn't understand at the time until Persephone broke it down, saying that he is a rapist. And Sade was in for a loop. She's like, what? And Persephone was like, yes, he is a rapist. And they said this to their teachers and the headmaster, but the headmaster ignored it completely, saying like, oh, I will talk to Jude, don't worry about it, but he was just being silly. And also Elizabeth had explained to the headmaster as well that she was raped by Jude. But once again, it was swept under the rug, saying that, okay, well, we'll talk to Jude. It won't happen again. He was just being silly. Don't worry about it. And they did not call the police or nothing. There was no investigation whatsoever. And so a lot of the girls at the school really had it, but a lot of them were quiet because they were scared, because this group of boys were very influential. They come from money. So they were scared, and also they weren't being heard at all. They were being ignored. So literally, Sade is coming up with this plan with Jude, because he invited her to this party that's a very popular party. I think it was for his birthday, and he was drunk or whatever, and Sade was just trying to get him a recording, a record of him admitting to all the crimes that he committed. But instead, she ends up turning off the recorder and talks to him about certain stuff. And then eventually she leaves, and then she realizes that she forgot her phone and her cardigan or whatever, or blazer that she wore to the party. So she went back and she found Jude dead. So now there's this whole investigation of Jude, and now it's proclaimed as a murder. And now Sade is, Persephone was like, did you do this? Did you do this? And they end up realizing that he had certain drugs in his system. And Persephone asked Sade, and then that's when Sade starts to break down the whole truth about who she is, about her background, and what she had done, as far as drugging Jude and why she had done it. Now, before Sade is pretty much about to tell her like certain things and what her main mission was and what her agenda was, we also know that Elizabeth was giving them clues, and Elizabeth had knew about the fishermen. She knew about their code names and nicknames that's on this chat, and whatever, she got down to who was who, what their nicknames was. Like the Ripper, that was Jude Ripley. So just keep that all in mind. And so once again, Elizabeth, tried to expose them. The headmaster ignored her. So she was scared because they were coming for her. And literally the headmaster even said, like, if you say this and this and this, you might lose your scholarship. So you might want to not mention this ever again to any of the staff, or me included. So once again, like I said, it's a corrupt establishment. It's a corrupt school. And the only thing they care about is money and the funding, and just making sure they protect these well-privileged boys, right? So keep that in mind. So we break down, so as I was saying about Sade and revealing everything, her motives and her agenda, we find out that she is a twin. She had a twin sister named Jamila, and they were both going through grief and what have you. And when their mother died, her father, had her favorites. Sade's father liked Jamila better. That was his favorite. So he said that he would allow Jamila to go to school, and Sade would be left behind. And Sade just was upset because her sister, Jamila, which she's older, even though they're twins, she was born first, she just didn't want to talk to her. She felt betrayed. Like, Jamila, you didn't stand up for me whatsoever. So they stopped talking or whatever. And, Jamila attended the Nightingale Academy. Then a couple months later, Jamila returns, and she's just not the same. She doesn't go out of her room or whatever. She doesn't go outside her room. But eventually, Sade ends up talking to her sister, and she sees her sister, her bones poking out of her body and what have you. And so Sade said, okay, let's have a day out together. So they have this day out together, and she was just, they bygones by bygones, right? Pretty much Sade was just pretty much forgiving Jamila. Then the next following day, Sade finds her twin sister in the lake, and her sister committed suicide. And then Sade was just in shock. She was like, why is this happening to me? And she even in the book, Sade references herself as Rogue from X-Men because she feels like her touch is lethal and that every time someone is with her, any loved one, they end up dying, they end up dead, or they end up committing suicide. So that's what she refers herself as Rogue from X-Men. And so she ends up finding her sister's journal or diary, and she starts reading it, and she finds out that her sister was raped, and she was raped by Jude Ripley. Right. And this is at a different academy. This is at the Nightingale Academy. And I guess with all that happened at Nightingale, Jude got he was transferred to ANA, Alfred Noble Academy. And so this was, for Sade, this was the perfect moment to get back at him for raping her sister. So she was trying to avenge Jamila and everything that Jude had done to her. So she had drugged him. But come to find out, it wasn't drugs that had killed Jude in the first place. So they're trying to figure out who killed Jude. But as they're trying to figure this out, they have a nice little memorial for him, you know, and pretty much named the new pool after him. And so the girls, as well as Sade and Persephone and Baz, they were all pissed because why are they celebrating someone who is a rapist, right? So they were enraged. And so they still wanted to find out who had killed Jude. So they were trying to put pieces together. But then also they end up finding Elizabeth. Elizabeth is alive, but she was hiding in a bunker. And so there's more to the story as for who hid her in this bunker and made sure that she stayed alive, what have you. Because the fishermen, you know, the boys with the group chat or whatever, Jude and August, which is were trying to kill Elizabeth. They were trying to cover her in cement in the new pool, at the new school pool. And apparently somebody saved her along the way. So I'm not gonna share it with you. I want you to figure it out on your own. And so everything was put in two together, and they finally realized who killed Jude in the first place, and everything. And so with that, everybody was being exposed. The headmaster was fired, and everything. Like once things were taking place, and once they found out who killed Jude, that's when things began to unravel in a good way. And that's when the girls were being heard, because they also hired a counselor for their students to have someone to talk to. So literally all that was taking place in this book. And it's not like a fast-paced book. You actually take your time. It's like a puzzle, and you're trying to figure out who did this. Okay, was it this person? Was it this person? It's like Clue, right? There's always these clues, but we don't know who did what. But I like that we as the book was going on, we got to know more about Sade and her background, and that she had a twin sister as well. So that was also amazing of how the structure of this book is written. I think that's why Farida is very talented. Like, I didn't care that it took forever for this second book to come out. I'm glad that she took her time, because this was just so well written. It makes you want to keep reading because it keeps you immersed. It keeps you wanting to feel like, okay, I need to figure out what happens next. Maybe it will help. Maybe it'll tell me in this next chapter. Maybe there's going to be a clue. But that's why I love Farida's writing so much. So as everyone is fired and people are being put in place at the school, there was speculation on whether Sade was going to be expelled or not. But Miss Blackburn, one of the teachers at the school, was saying, we'll give you a chance. So you're not necessarily expelled because of the things that you did and you exposed, but you will be expelled if you don't do this and this and this. So Sade made sure that she was able to stay at the academy and Sade just loved the setting of being in a school and finally making friends, because she didn't have any friends. So this was just a breath of fresh air. But mind you, she was still grieving. She was going through grief. Also, since Shadi was able to stay at the school, she began to thrive as well because she was now one of the captains of the swimming team, which I didn't mention before. Like, swimming is like one of her things that keeps her at bay. It brings peace to her. So that's one thing that she loves doing, is swimming. That's the only thing, that's one of her coping things that she can do that helps her and brings down her, stops her anxiety from happening, you know, her anxiety attacks. So that's another good snippet about Sade as well. But I want to read to you where it says, it's called, you know, this chapter is called The Bright Future. It says, the school board had already reached a verdict on how to handle the fisherman situation. They agreed to put up posters about bullying around the school and had scheduled assemblies about the perils of drug abuse. Other than that, they would be taking no further action against any of the boys who have been singled out via the website. And then it says their answer was no answer. They didn't even mention the words sexual assault or rape once. So there was another thing. There was not a lot of justice served. You know, there really wasn't. They were still sweeping things under the rug as regarding the boys and their activities and what they had done to these girls. But it goes on to say the boys had stopped updating the chat, likely aware that there was someone watching their moves now, given everything that was on the website. And then she said she highly doubted that this meant their shenanigans had stopped. They probably just migrated to some other more secure host for their gentleman's club. So there wasn't a lot of justice, but it was the beginning for that. It says, let's see. It says, which was, of course, unsurprising given that many of the boys had connections on the same school board that made this very difficult decision. In their statement, they even said, we can't just allow the promising futures of these boys to be wasted on baseless evidence and what seems to be a singular person pointing the finger. So there you have that as well. So once again, these girls didn't really receive justice, but it was a start. It was a start. And then it goes on to say there were many pictures and they spanned years. It was hard to tell where it even began and whom it began with, but this was not unique to the boys of ANA. This was everywhere. In schools where you were meant to be kept safe by teachers, where sometimes even the teachers themselves were the danger. Inside communities where people abused the power they so easily wielded. Inside homes, the world over, everywhere. Boys with everything. The world had been and always would be theirs for the taking. And it goes on to say, Sade had learned to fear the men who had everything because even the moon, the skies, and the earth could not sate them. She found that she couldn't be alone with her thoughts for much longer, and so she got pulled her boots up, and she proceeded on. But that's just to let you say that's literally how the system works. Sometimes there is no justice, but there is awareness, and people are aware of it and people know about it. But there wasn't a lot of justice for these boys. No one was going to prison or whatever. There was no type of punishment. So just keep that in mind as well. But I think the whole point of this book is what Farida was doing was bringing awareness to this and realizing that girls are not being heard and they're constantly being ignored. All that's like, this is even beyond high school or whatever. This is in life and in general of what goes on in this world. And once again, I like that the awareness that this book brings. Now, once again, as I said, that Sade was thriving in school and being the captain of the swim team. There's also something to say closer to the end of the book. And it says, she still had awful nightmares filled with shadowy figures that roamed the haunted halls of her mind. She suspected she'd always have these dreams, but at least they weren't as frequent. For the most part, she was doing good. But the thing about grief was that even 100 good days were sometimes weighed down by an overwhelming guilt of forgetting. Sometimes she'd win a swim meet and for a moment forget why she was ever sad at all. And the guilt of not constantly being consumed by the weight of the loss she had experienced would be paralyzing. Other times she'd feel the crushing weight of the past trying to drown her still. So she's still grieving. She's still going through the stages of grief for her. So just keep that in mind as well. Like, this book brings awareness. It talks about, about people, having sort of ways to cope with what's going on with them. And one of the things that she was able to cope with was, and how to try to eliminate her anxiety, was swimming and being in a pool and, or just swimming in general. That was her way of calming herself and her way of being at peace. So I like how it also talks about grief in here, and that is a process of healing. And it's, every different person has their own different process of healing and their own process of grieving, which I also like that as well. And so I want to read a little bit of the acknowledgments of this book because I found that to be really good. It says, Where Sleeping Girls Lie is a story that simply would not exist without the guidance and support of so many people. I wrote this book over the course of 3 long, arduous years, most of which were in the height of a global pandemic when we were not only trapped inside and forced to face our own mortality for months on end, but also when many of us experienced overwhelming and constant waves of grief. I lost several family members in the pandemic. It felt like every month we'd get a call that someone else had passed on, and I was convinced at points that we were all living in some twisted Groundhog Day where the end of the world kept arriving with no sign of stopping. On the day I sold Where Sleeping Girls Lie, along with Ace of Spades, to my publisher in the United States, I heard that my great aunt Harriet had passed away. I couldn't really celebrate the publishing news when something so earth-shattering had happened and would continue to happen all throughout the pandemic. I was also still in university, somehow working on my undergraduate thesis and final essays while launching Ace of Spades. I think all of this, combined with the fact that sophomore novels are notoriously difficult, meant that when it came to working on Where Sleeping Girls Lie, I was so burnt out from the real world I couldn't even fathom trying to create a fictional one. And yet, in the words of Kamala Harris, we did it, Joe. The we in question being the amazing people I'm about to talk about below. So we also are being aware of what Farida was going through as well, while writing as Ace of Spades, while writing Where Sleeping Girls Lie. And that people, people are still grieving to this day of the people that they lost during the pandemic. People are still grieving to this day of who they lost 20 years ago. Everyone, like I said, everyone has their own process of grieving. And you just never know what people are going through, and you should always show kindness, right? Always show kindness. No matter who they are, show kindness, because you honestly don't know what they went through that day. You honestly do not. Sade did not know that that would be the last day that she would get to spend the time with her sister. She had no idea. Tomorrow is never promised. And I think that's why, regardless of if you go to the store or whatever and somebody messes up, or something, somebody messed up, your day, or there was an order not properly placed, try to be nice to that person, because they'll help you. They will help you. But if you're constantly rude to them, like, why would they help you, right? So just show kindness, show respect for everyone. Because like I said, we don't know what everyone is going through. We don't know what their day was, right? So just be kind. Just show kindness. But like I said, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This was just a fantastic book. And Farida has done it again. She has done it again. And my heart goes out to her and her family of the people that she lost and, during the pandemic. But this was just phenomenal piece of art and piece of work. And of course, the cover is amazing as well. But once again, a 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't read Ace of Spades yet, I highly recommend it. It is so good. I even did a book review for that book as well, which I'll leave it up above. But I really hope you enjoyed this video and this book review. I know, like, my small snippet of, non-spoileries was a little short, but I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of this book and explain to you how great it is, and why it's so great, and how it brings so much awareness to people in their grieving process. So just keep that in mind. And also about things that people deal with when it comes to bullying and everything that happens in an establishment, whether that's at work, whether that's at school, home, wherever. I like that it brings awareness to this. But once again, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please, please, please give me a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell to be notified when I upload more videos in the future. But once again, thank you all so, so much for watching, and I hope you all are staying healthy and staying safe, and I will catch y'all next time. Bye, everyone.